Okay, ji. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So this video is about implementation of stack using a singly linked list. So we'll be creating this stack on heap. So let's just start by uh, assuming you have a stack of this folder. Let's just identify the concept here, and here the stack is empty. So if the stack is empty, then that would mean that you'll actually have to, before you actually do in terms of implementation, you'll have to create a class first, and that class that you create, that should have, like, obviously the first data member that it should contain should be the data itself, okay, that you want to add. And the second one is you can also call it next or link, or whatever you want to call it. Link would primarily contain the address of the next element on the stack, that is primarily underneath the stack, underneath the top element. So let's say you have got, let's say, two elements here, डेटा मेंबर्स हेयर, एंड लेट्स से इस ये आपके पास 10 है और ये आपके पास 11 है. So the top of the stack should actually point to the address where 11 is actually present, and we'll call this as the top. Obviously, a stack would be empty when top actually, and what would this node be representing? This node be representing, this node primarily be representing two things here. One is the data, which is 11 in this particular case, pertaining to this data member of this particular class, and we can call this class as a node. And then it would contain the address of the next member. So the address of the next member will be contained in the second data member in this particular case, right? So if you have another node here, then of course you will have the data here. So let's say you have got this data, which is 5, and the link here would contain the address of the member, another node which is present underneath this 5, and then top will now be pointing to 5 in this particular case. Okay, so this is how the implementation would take place. So let's assume that you actually have to insert the first element in this particular scenario. So if you have to contain the first element, so you generate a node here, okay, and let's generate a node, and we'll call this node as a temporary node. Okay, initially we'll call it a temporary node. Okay, so we can say that it's actually temp. Okay, and to this temp, what we'll do is that we'll add whatever value we want to add. Let's say we want to add a value 4 in this case, we can add the value 4. And then initially the address that it would contain, initially the address that it would contain is primarily the null address, because this is the first element, तो इसके नीचे और कोई element नहीं होगा. So this temp will then primarily be placed at this particular location, and this will be present on heap. So we'll generate it dynamically, and just for representation purposes, I am showing it in this basket. But it actually won't be in terms of a basket in this particular case, or in case of an array in this form, and this is just for the representation purposes. Okay, so the first thing that it would contain is, let's say you'll have 4 here, and this would contain null, and I'll just be representing null by n. And then this temp, because you also have another pointer, and that pointer is the top pointer. So top will primarily be pointing to the top element which is present on the stack. So in this case, when it's the first element, then temp top would primarily be containing temp. Okay, top would primarily be containing temp. तो top जो है वो फिर इस temp को जो है वो actually point कर रहा होगा. So this is how the first element would actually be inserted. So now if you want to insert the second element in this particular case, the second element has to be inserted. So we'll, let's say, push the second element, we call it the push operation. So here let's say कि आपके पास एक second element है. First node आपके पास जो था, that was, let's say, 4, and it was actually pointing to null, and we'll represent by n, and top is primarily represented here with this pointing to this. So now we'll insert another element. So एक और हम element insert कर देते हैं और node insert कर देते हैं. तो we'll generate a node using some the class structure, उससे हम node create करेंगे. And what we'll do is that we'll generate a node, and initially we'll say that it's actually the temporary node, and let's say we'll say that it's actually a temporary node. We'll insert the value here, whatever that value we want to insert. Let's say we want to insert the value 8, and initially it would actually be on top of the previous element. Okay, so this would primarily be inserted at this particular position. तो यहाँ पे आपके पास आ जाएगा 8, and what would be the address? The address that it would contain will be the address of the previous node, and the previous node that was present. So what is the address of that previous node? The address of the previous node, which is, let's say, this node, this address of this previous node is primarily present in this top. ठीक है, तो टॉप जो है वो एड्रेस ऑफ द फर्स्ट नोड को प्रेजेंट कर रहा है. तो अब आपने करना क्या है कि टॉप को प्राइमरीली टॉप के अंदर से जो एड्रेस है, उस टॉप के अंदर आपने इसका एड्रेस ख़त्म करके, राइट, आपने इसका एड्रेस ऐड कर देना. ठीक है, तो प्रीवियसली यहाँ पे लेट्स से कि ये जो नोड आपने एंटर किया था, ये जो नोड आपने एंटर किया था, इसका एड्रेस था लेट्स से 1000. ठीक है, लेट्स से कि ये 1000 था. तो अभी टॉप के अंदर जो पड़ा होगा वो एड्रेस पड़ा होगा 1000, बिकॉज टॉप वुड बी पॉइंटिंग दी टॉप नोड. लेकिन जैसे ही आप दूसरा नोड इसके अंदर ऐड करेंगे, तो ये 1000 जो है, दैट 1000 will be present in the second node जो आपने एंटर किया. तो 1000 will be present here. ओके, और इस नए नोड का एड्रेस है, लेट्स से कि इस नए नोड का एड्रेस जो था वो दैट वाज 2000. ठीक है, सो नाउ टॉप विल कंटेन द एड्रेस 2000. ठीक है, तो टॉप के अंदर जो एड्रेस पड़ा होगा दैट विल बी 2000. ठीक है, so if I just represent this representation would be in this particular form. So you'll have the bottommost node जिसमें 4 है, and it's actually not pointing to any other node, तो यहाँ पे null होगा. Then you have another node, and that another node contains 8, और यहाँ पे इस नोड का लेट्स से एड्रेस जो था दैट वाज 1000. सो हियर द सेकंड नोड वुड कंटेन 1000, और ये जो सेकंड नोड आपने जनरेट किया है, लेट्स से कि इस सेकंड नोड का अपना एड्रेस जो था वो 2000 था. सो नाउ टॉप जो है, टॉप पॉइंटर दैट वुड कंटेन द एड्रेस 2000. ठीक है, एंड दैट मीन्स कि इट्स एक्चुअली पॉइंटिंग टू दिस पर्टिकुलर नोड. ठीक है, so this is how this would primarily be done. So if I want to insert a third node, I can actually do that. Third node जब मैं insert करूँगा इस केस के अंदर, again I'll generate a temporary node. I mean एक temporary node मैं पहले generate करूँगा, उसके अंदर I'll just add the value. Let's say that value is 10. I'll add that value, और इस temporary node के अंदर what would be the address that would be present in this temporary node? The address of the previous top. The previous top address is 2000, so I'll just add 2000 here, and let's say कि इसका अपना जो address था वो 3000 था इस particular node का. So this will go here, right? You will have this here, और इसका जो अपना address था 3000, now that 3000 will be now present in the top node. So 3000 will be present in this top node instead of 2000. So ये लिंक खत्म हो जाएगा. or top will now be pointing to this particular address. Okay, so this would primarily be 10, and then we'll have let's say the address which is 2000 of the previous head जो कि इसके अंदर पड़ा हुआ है. अच्छा, so this is how this is what the push operation would be. Okay, और push overflow, stack overflow या heap overflow उस वक्त होगी when you'll not have enough space to add more nodes there. So you'll just have to check whether you are able to generate a particular node dynamically or not, because you are generating it on the heap. If you are unable to generate a node dynamically, then stack overflow or heap overflow error will actually be generated. So you'll have to put a check on that.